Why did you have to show up now? Ryan spat, his voice shaking as he slammed the door shut. Her eyes, wide, shocked, lingered in his mind even after the door closed. It was too late. He'd already made a choice that might destroy everything. Before we dive into this story, I need to know something. Have you ever helped someone, only to wish you hadn't later? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever felt like kindness came with a price, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to know how this story unfolds. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Ryan Miller's morning started like any other. The alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m., a reminder that he had only 30 minutes to get dressed and make sure his 8-year-old son, Luke, was awake and ready for school. Ryan's life had been a whirlwind of routines. Breakfast, the school drop-off, then work at the corporate office as a mid-level manager. Every day felt the same, and every evening ended with him staring at his phone, scrolling through messages from clients and friends, the constant hum of life pushing him forward. But there was something missing, a feeling he couldn't name. Even his modest house, with its peeling wallpaper and the mismatched furniture he'd inherited from his parents, felt a little too quiet. He was used to the silence. Except when Luke asked, "Why do you work so much, Dad?" That question always caught him off guard, bringing him back to reality. That morning, it wasn't Luke's question that haunted him. It was the knock on the door that changed everything. Ryan had just gotten back from dropping Luke off at school when he saw her. Jessie. She was sitting by the front steps, clutching a crumpled, well-worn blanket around her shoulders. She had the same lost look he'd seen weeks ago when he gave her a meal outside his office. He hadn't seen her in weeks. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. He didn't want to get involved. He had enough problems. But there was something in her eyes that tugged at him, something raw and desperate. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "Jessie?" he asked, unsure of what to say. She didn't look up right away, but then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I remember you. You gave me food last month. I didn't forget." Ryan nodded. "It's been a while. Are you okay?" She shook her head. "No, but I don't want charity. Just need something to eat. I don't want anything else." Ryan felt a pang of guilt, but his hands stayed at his sides. His life was already complicated enough. Helping a stranger on the street wasn't something he wanted to make a habit of. But something about the sadness in her voice pulled him in. "All right, come on," he said after a moment, stepping aside. "I've got some leftover pizza from last night. You can have it." Jessie looked up, her eyes brightening, and for a moment, it felt like Ryan was doing the right thing. As she ate in silence, Ryan leaned against the doorframe, glancing at the clock. He needed to get back to work, but he didn't want to leave her out there alone. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Jessie shrugged. "I'm fine. I've been fine for a long time. Just needed a meal. Nothing more." Ryan didn't press it further. He knew how fragile pride could be. After a few moments, she finished, wiped her hands on the blanket, and stood up. "Thank you," she said quietly, turning away. Ryan hesitated but then gave a small nod. "Good luck out there." 2 weeks later, the knock at his door came at 7 p.m., just as Ryan was sitting down to dinner with Luke. The boy was excited, asking about his school project while Ryan tried to focus, shoveling pasta into his mouth, his mind already half distracted by emails from work. But when he opened the door, it wasn't Jessie this time. It was a man in a tailored suit, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Ryan Miller?" the man asked, his voice sharp, professional. "Yes? Can I help you?" The man didn't smile. "I'm Peter Harding. I represent Ms. Jessie Monroe. She's asked me to deliver some papers to you." Ryan blinked. "Papers? I don't understand." "She's filing a legal claim. You'll need to look over these documents," Harding said flatly, handing Ryan a thick stack of papers. Ryan's mind raced. Legal claim? What in the world was going on? Legal claim, Ryan repeated, feeling a sense of unease. "I don't even know her last name." Harding gave a small shrug. "That's irrelevant, Mr. Miller. She's chosen to involve you in this matter, and you'll need to respond. The briefcase clicked shut, and Harding turned, walking back to the car parked in front of Ryan's house without another word. Ryan stood in the doorway holding the papers in his hand, his mind spinning. Jessie, this woman he had barely spoken to, was suing him? The shock was overwhelming. Who was it, Dad? Luke's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Ryan glanced at his son. I don't know, buddy, but we need to talk. Ryan couldn't stop looking at the papers. They were thick, too thick for something that seemed so sudden. He flipped through the legal documents, barely able to make sense of the jargon. The letters felt heavier with each page he turned. Jessie Monroe. The name barely meant anything to him, but the papers made it clear. He was now involved in something far bigger than just offering a meal to a stranger. The door slammed behind him as he sat down at the kitchen table. Luke was still at the table, oblivious to the growing tension in the room. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. How was he supposed to explain this to his son? He didn't even know where to begin. 2 days earlier, the morning after Jessie had shown up, Ryan had convinced himself he'd never see her again. He'd left her on the porch with the leftover pizza, figuring it was just a fleeting moment of kindness. Life would go back to normal. But then his phone rang at work, a number he didn't recognize. He picked it up on instinct, his thoughts elsewhere. Mr. Miller? A woman's voice asked sharply. This is Laura Graham from Monroe and Associates. You need to come to our office immediately. Ryan had paused. The name Monroe hit him like a cold wave, and he had a flashback to Jessie sitting outside his front door. That could only mean one thing. This was her lawyer. I'm sorry, who's this? Ryan asked, trying to hide his growing unease. Laura Graham, Mr. Miller. We've been trying to reach you regarding a pending matter with our client, Ms. Jessie Monroe. Wait, I don't know what this is about, Ryan stammered. That's what we need to discuss, Laura interrupted, her tone firm but not unkind. We need you here for a conversation. Now. Ryan's mind raced. Why would Jessie need to get lawyers involved? Was this some kind of misunderstanding? She'd seemed so desperate when she asked for food. The whole thing felt wrong. He grabbed his coat and left for the office. The drive felt long, even though it was only a 15-minute trip. His thoughts kept replaying that day on the porch. The way Jessie had eaten without saying much, her face etched with a mixture of relief and shame. Could he have misunderstood something? What could a homeless woman want with him? Someone who barely had time to keep his own life in order. Ryan arrived at Monroe and Associates, a sleek office building in downtown. The polished glass doors felt cold as he entered, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in his chest. The receptionist, a young woman in a dark suit, smiled politely as she led him through the lobby. Mr. Miller, they're expecting you, she said, gesturing to the door at the end of the hall. Ryan barely heard her. His thoughts were miles away. He knocked on the door, already knowing that the answers he was about to get would change everything. Inside, the room was minimalist, modern, a sharp contrast to the worn edges of his own life. Laura Graham stood up as he walked in, her expression unreadable. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, and Ryan reluctantly sat. Mr. Miller, Laura began. We're here to discuss a situation involving our client, Ms. Monroe. Ryan swallowed hard. What do you mean? I don't even know her last name. I just gave her some food a few weeks ago. Laura nodded slowly, folding her hands on the desk. That's what we need to clarify. You see, Ms. Monroe is not just some homeless woman. She's the sole owner of a multimillion-dollar enterprise, and her legal team has been monitoring various unfortunate interactions she's had, one of which involved you. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He blinked, trying to process the words. Jessie, a millionaire? The same woman who was living on the streets? She's a... what? Ryan asked, the words barely forming. A multi-million-dollar enterprise, Laura repeated. But she's had a series of legal issues, and she's seeking some form of restitution. Your kindness, however genuine, has put her in a vulnerable position. That's why we're here. Ryan didn't know whether to laugh or to feel sick. Was this some kind of joke? You're telling me this whole thing is because I gave her a slice of pizza? Laura leaned forward, her tone softening. Not exactly, Mr. Miller. What happened wasn't just about the meal. It's about what you represented to her. She saw you, someone who cared, even for a moment. That triggered something much bigger than she was ready to confront. Ryan's mind was reeling. He didn't understand. I don't get it. What am I supposed to do? Laura folded her arms. You've been listed as a key figure in this. Your relationship with Ms. Monroe needs to be clarified. We can't proceed without knowing the full extent of your involvement. Ryan shook his head. I barely know her. I don't want anything to do with her. Laura's eyes narrowed slightly. I suggest you take this seriously. This is more complicated than you realize. Later that night, Ryan returned home with more questions than answers. He'd been handed papers that made it clear he was a part of something that he didn't sign up for. But he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Jesse's situation was a lot more complicated than he first thought. Luke was finishing his homework when Ryan walked in. The quietness of their home seemed heavier now, pressing down on him. Dad, you okay? Ryan forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, buddy. Just had a long day. Luke gave him a skeptical look, his sharp gaze not missing a thing. Ryan sat next to him at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of the silence settle in around them. Is something going on? Luke asked softly, sensing the tension. Ryan sighed, rubbing his face. I don't know, son. There's something about this whole thing with that woman. I don't know what she wants from me, but it's more than I ever expected. Luke looked up at him. Maybe you should just call her and ask. Ryan chuckled, though it wasn't a happy sound. If only it were that easy. As Ryan sank into his couch later that night, staring at the papers in his hands, a feeling of dread gnawed at him. Jessie Monroe wasn't just a random homeless woman. She was someone with power, someone whose presence had now changed the course of his life. The questions he'd been asking were only the beginning. But what if he was wrong? What if helping her wasn't the mistake? What if everything he thought he knew about her, and about himself, was about to be turned upside down? Tomorrow he would find out just how deep the rabbit hole went, and whether or not he was ready to confront it. The morning after the meeting with Laura, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The weight of the papers had felt heavier when he woke up, like something invisible had settled into his chest overnight. Every time he glanced at them, he felt his stomach tighten. Was it possible that Jessie Monroe was telling the truth? Was there really a chance that his simple act of kindness had spiraled into something much bigger? He dropped Luke off at school, feeling like he was walking in a fog. The city around him felt different today, as if it was moving faster than he could keep up. Ryan worked hard to keep his thoughts focused on the road, but his mind kept drifting back to the meeting. Jessie Monroe wasn't just some random woman he'd helped once. She was rich, powerful, someone with connections. How could he have missed that? As he parked his truck outside his office building, he tried to shake off the unease. He needed to focus. Work was the one thing that kept his life from spinning completely out of control. He was a single dad, a struggling guy who didn't have the luxury of worrying about things he couldn't change. But as he walked inside the building, he realized something. He couldn't ignore this. He couldn't act like nothing had happened. Because deep down, he knew Jessie's presence. Her power, her wealth, was pulling him in whether he liked it or not. The next day, Ryan sat at his desk, scrolling through email after email. His mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying the words Laura had said, trying to make sense of them. He thought about Jessie, about how she'd looked when he'd offered her food. She had been broken in a way that he understood. He'd been there once, lost, desperate for something or someone to see him, to care. But now, here he was, pulled into a legal mess, his simple gesture becoming the center of something bigger. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he glanced at the screen. It was a text from his ex-wife, Natalie. Ryan, you need to call me. I know what's going on with the woman. His heart dropped. Natalie had always been able to sniff out trouble from miles away. He tapped the message, his fingers hovering over the keys. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't ready to explain everything to her. Not yet. Ryan shoved his phone in his pocket and stood up, grabbing his coat. He needed air. More than anything, he needed space to think. The cafe around the corner. Ryan didn't often stop for coffee, but today felt different. His feet led him to a small cafe on the corner, a place he used to visit with Luke when he had the weekends off. It was familiar, comfortable. He ordered a black coffee, sitting down by the window. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows on the wooden table. People came and went, most of them too busy with their own lives to notice the quiet guy nursing his coffee in the corner. Ryan stared into his cup, trying to clear his mind. What was he supposed to do with all this? What if Jessie was using him to get something? What if she was just another manipulator out there looking to take advantage of someone who cared too much? He didn't know the answer, but he did know one thing. He couldn't afford to get involved in something that could destroy him and Luke. His thoughts were interrupted when the door opened, and a woman entered. The air seemed to change as she walked past his table, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. For a brief second, their eyes met. It was Jessie. Her presence struck him like a sudden gust of wind. She didn't see him. She was too busy looking at the cashier, ordering something in a quiet, measured voice. But Ryan couldn't take his eyes off her. She was the last person he expected to see in a cafe like this, so different from the image he had of her when they'd met. She wasn't some homeless woman anymore. She was something else entirely. He felt the tug. He wanted to walk over to her, but his feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. He was about to stand when Jessie turned toward him. Their eyes met again, and there it was. The flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by something else. Something unreadable. But before Ryan could react, she turned and walked toward the door. The bell above the cafe door jingled as she left. Ryan stared after her for a long time. He should have said something. He should have at least spoken to her, asked what was going on. But he didn't. He couldn't. Not like this. He finished his coffee in a hurry, feeling the cool rush of anxiety clawing at him. His phone buzzed in his pocket again. This time it was a voicemail from Laura Graham. Later that night, Ryan sat alone on the couch. He'd left work early to pick up Luke, knowing his son was probably feeling the weight of the silence hanging between them. Luke's questions about what was going on with Jessie had been soft, subtle, but Ryan could see the worry in his eyes. He couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. Ryan checked his phone. It was a text from Laura. "Mr. Miller, we need to discuss the next steps. Please call us as soon as you can." His heart pounded. Was this it? Was he about to find out what Jessie wanted? But before he could respond, Luke walked into the room. "Dad," he said quietly, "are we going to talk about what's going on?" Ryan let out a deep breath, rubbing his eyes. He hadn't been ready for this conversation. Not yet, but he couldn't keep avoiding it. "I don't know, Luke. It's complicated." Luke sat down beside him, looking up with wide eyes. "Do you think she'll come back?" Ryan stared at his son, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. What if this wasn't just about Jessie Monroe? What if it was about everything he was trying to protect? His son, his life, his world. What if he was in over his head? The phone buzzed again, and Ryan froze. He didn't want to look, but he couldn't stop himself. He tapped the message. It was from Jessie. "We need to talk." The words were short, too short, but they hit him like a punch to the gut. Everything was about to change, whether he was ready for it or not. And this time, he wasn't sure if he could control what happened next. Ryan hadn't expected Jessie to show up at his door. But there she was, standing on his doorstep as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the front yard. His breath caught in his throat, his hand hovering over the doorknob, unsure whether to open the door or close it again. For a moment, everything around him fell away. The soft hum of the evening, the distant sound of traffic, even the thoughts racing through his mind. It was just her. The woman who had changed everything with a single act of kindness. The woman whose presence had him questioning his own life, his own choices. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, despite the chaos that seemed to follow her everywhere. "We need to talk." Ryan swallowed hard, stepping back to let her in, unsure what to say or do. Inside, the house felt even smaller than usual. The clutter from Luke's toys scattered on the floor, the unopened mail on the counter. It was all part of the routine he tried to keep up. But now, with Jessie standing there in front of him, everything felt different, like she didn't belong in this world of his. She looked around the room, her eyes briefly scanning his humble home, taking in the worn furniture, the small touches that spoke of a single dad trying his best. Jessie didn't seem impressed. She seemed curious. "Nice place," she said, her tone almost casual. But Ryan could sense the underlying tension in her voice. He didn't know how to respond. "It's home." Jessie nodded, but her eyes never left him. "Ryan, I know you're not sure what you've gotten yourself into, but I can promise you this. There's more to this than you realize." Ryan blinked, his thoughts a jumbled mess. "What do you mean?" Jessie took a breath, clearly considering how much to reveal. "Look, I didn't come here to cause trouble. I came because you don't know who I really am. And it's time you did." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Jessie didn't wait for him to say anything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, thick with papers, and handed it to him. Ryan took it, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't even have to open it to know this was serious. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about a meal he'd shared with a homeless woman. "Do you know what this is?" Jessie asked, her eyes meeting his in a way that felt almost like a challenge. He nodded. "It looks like legal papers." Jessie's eyes softened, but only slightly. "They are. A settlement offer from my lawyers. A way to make sure this doesn't get any messier than it has to." Ryan stared at the papers in his hands, a growing sense of dread crawling up his spine. I don't understand. What are you asking for?" Jessie sighed, rubbing her forehead like she had been carrying a weight for too long. "I'm asking for your help, Ryan. Not for money or anything else, but I need your name on something. Something that could save me and my company." Ryan's mind was spinning, but he couldn't make sense of it. "Your company?" Jessie nodded, her expression growing serious. "I'm not just some random homeless woman you helped once. I'm the CEO of Monroe Industries, one of the largest real estate firms in the country. And right now, I'm in the middle of a massive corporate battle. A fight that could ruin everything I've built." Ryan's mouth went dry. "You're the CEO?" Jessie's smile was tight, almost apologetic. "I know it seems hard to believe, but everything you think you know about me, it's not the full picture. I'm not just a woman in need. I've been fighting for everything I have." Ryan's thoughts felt like they were scattered on the floor, too many pieces to pick up at once. He hadn't known. He had no idea. And now, she was standing in his small living room, offering him a way into her world. A world that seemed so far out of his reach. Jessie continued, her voice growing more urgent. "I know you didn't mean to get involved, Ryan, but now you are. And if you don't help me, it's not just your life that could be ruined. It's mine too." Ryan stared at her, unsure of what to say. He didn't belong in this world of billion-dollar companies, high-stakes deals, and powerful lawyers. He was just a guy who had tried to do the right thing to feed a hungry woman. But now it was bigger than that. Much bigger. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Ryan could feel the weight of the papers in his hands, the words on them as foreign as the world Jessie was asking him to step into. "You want me to sign this?" he asked quietly, looking up at her. Jessie nodded, her gaze intense. "Not just that. I need you to understand something. There's a reason I came to you. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for your trust. Because this isn't just about me. It's about you too." Ryan looked down at the papers again. His mind was racing, his pulse quickening. Everything he had worked so hard to protect. His son, his life could be at risk. But could he walk away? The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, cutting through the tense silence in the room. Ryan's eyes flicked to the door, his heart skipping a beat. It was too much. This wasn't just a meeting. It wasn't just a plea for help. It was something else. Something much bigger. And whatever was coming next, Ryan knew. There was no turning back. Ryan sat on the edge of his couch, the text from his sister still fresh on his mind. "Call me when you can. Need to talk." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was undeniable. He hadn't heard from her in days, not since the last time they'd spoken about their father's condition. And now she was reaching out again. Something was wrong. He stared at his phone. The legal papers Jesse had left him still scattered on the coffee table. His world had been turned upside down in just 24 hours, and he couldn't seem to make sense of it all. Jesse's offer, her unexpected visit, the bombshell that she was more than just a random woman in need of help. She was the CEO of a billion-dollar company. He hadn't asked for any of this. Yet here he was, standing on the edge of something that felt far bigger than his life. The thought of his son, Luke, playing in his room just down the hall made him pause. Ryan's life had always been simple: work, family, and the daily grind. But now, the choices in front of him felt like they would define not just his future, but Luke's too. He thought back to the first time he'd met Jessie, how she'd been sitting in the corner of the small diner, her clothes a little too expensive for the place. He remembered how she'd looked at him with those eyes full of stories he couldn't even begin to guess at. And now, after everything that had happened, here they were, tied together by something neither of them fully understood. The sound of Luke's laughter echoed down the hall, and Ryan's heart clenched. His son deserved stability. He deserved a future that wasn't marked by uncertainty. But the more Ryan thought about Jesse's offer, the more he realized how much he didn't know. He didn't know what the future would look like if he said yes. He didn't know if he could live with the consequences if he said no. He grabbed his phone and dialed his sister's number. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hey, Ryan." Her voice was calm, but there was something in her tone that made his stomach twist. "Hey, I got your text. What's going on?" There was a long pause, and for a moment Ryan thought she might hang up. But then she spoke, her voice quieter this time. "It's Dad. He's been asking about you." Ryan's heart sank. He hadn't heard from their father in weeks, not since his last hospital visit. His father had been getting weaker, and Ryan had been doing his best to keep up with the demands of being a single parent. But now it was clear that his father needed him more than ever. "Is he okay?" Ryan asked, the words feeling heavy. He's asking for you, Ryan. He's not doing well. I think it's time you came home. We need to talk about what happens next." Ryan closed his eyes, letting the weight of her words settle on his chest. He didn't want to leave Luke alone, not with everything going on. But he couldn't ignore his father's health, not when he needed Ryan the most. "I'll come by tomorrow," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll figure it out. But I need to make sure Luke's all right." His sister was silent for a moment. "I understand. But Ryan, this could be your last chance to say goodbye to him properly." Ryan's throat tightened. "I know. I'll be there." He hung up without another word and sat in the silence that followed. The weight of his sister's words lingered in the air. This was bigger than anything he had faced before. His family needed him, but so did his future. He had never been in a position like this, torn between duty and opportunity. The next morning, after making sure Luke was fed and settled for the day, Ryan drove to his father's house. He wasn't sure what he expected when he arrived, but when he stepped inside and saw his father lying in bed, pale and weak, the world shifted. "Dad?" Ryan said softly, sitting by his father's side. His father opened his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, there was recognition in them. "Ryan," his father rasped, his voice barely audible. "I knew you'd come." Ryan swallowed hard. "Of course I came, Dad. I'm always here for you." There was a long silence between them, one that spoke volumes. His father was fading, and Ryan could feel the time slipping away. His father reached out with trembling hands, and Ryan took them in his own, feeling the coldness of them. "I've made a mess of things," his father whispered, his voice cracked. "I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to have to carry this weight." Ryan didn't know what to say. He had heard his father's regrets before, but this felt different. This was the end of something. a chapter closing that neither of them had wanted. "You didn't mess anything up," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the best you could." But his father wasn't listening. "No, Ryan. You have to take care of yourself now. You have to make a choice. Don't let fear hold you back." Ryan clenched his jaw, trying to fight back the tears that threatened to break free. This was harder than he could have imagined. How could he be expected to make a choice between two different futures? One with his family and one with a woman who might change his life forever. The conversation shifted to other things. Old memories, shared stories. But the weight of his father's words lingered in the air. Ryan knew what was coming. His father wasn't going to make it much longer. And after he was gone, Ryan would have to face whatever choices lay ahead, whether he was ready or not. When Ryan left his father's house, he felt like a piece of himself had been left behind. The decision he had been avoiding, the one that had been gnawing at him, had just become more urgent. Jesse's offer, his father's fading words, Luke's future. They were all tangled up together, and there was no clear way out. That night, as Ryan lay in bed, his phone buzzed with another message from Jesse. "I need to talk to you. It's important." The message sent a chill through him. The decision he had been dreading was coming, and it was coming fast. But what did Jesse need now? And what was Ryan willing to risk to find out? The days blurred together. Ryan barely had time to process the whirlwind of the last few weeks. His father's passing had shaken him to his core, but the responsibilities of his life hadn't slowed down. Luke was still young, still needed him in ways Ryan couldn't quite explain. And the looming decision about Jesse was starting to feel like a weight he couldn't escape. It was a late Tuesday afternoon when Ryan's phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his chest tighten. Jesse. He stared at the screen for a moment, his finger hovering over the message. "We need to talk." It wasn't the first time she'd sent him a message like this, but this one felt different. He'd spent the past few days trying to push thoughts of her out of his mind, focusing on what mattered. Taking care of Luke, settling his father's affairs, figuring out how to move forward with his life. But Jesse had a way of sneaking back into his thoughts, each message like a tug on his heartstrings. And he couldn't deny it any longer. He was drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. Sighing, he swiped the screen and typed back a quick reply. "I'll be at the cafe in 30 minutes. He needed answers, needed clarity. More than that, he needed to know where he stood. When Ryan walked into the small cafe where they'd met for their first conversation, Jessie was already sitting by the window, her face buried in a cup of coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, the tiredness in her eyes matching the heavy sadness in his own. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced with something that seemed almost fragile. "Hey," Ryan said softly, pulling out the chair across from her. Jessie looked up, her gaze locking with his for a split second before she looked away. "Hey!" The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Jessie placed her cup on the table, her fingers tracing the rim absently. Ryan could feel the weight of the moment. He knew she was about to say something important, something that could change everything. "You know," Jessie began, her voice quiet, "when I first came to you for help, I had no idea where it would lead. I didn't expect—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the side as if she was trying to gather the right words. "You didn't expect to be tangled up in my life," Ryan finished for her, his voice rough with the honesty they both were too afraid to admit. Jessie didn't respond at first, her gaze drifting out the window as if searching for something beyond the glass. She seemed distant, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. "I didn't expect this either," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect you, and I didn't expect to want to stay. But now I can't help but feel like maybe I'm not just here to help you." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Jessie looked back at him, her expression torn. "I've been thinking about everything, about you, about Luke, about my own life. I've spent so many years running from responsibility, trying to keep myself detached from everyone. But I can't keep doing that. I can't keep pretending like I don't care." Ryan leaned forward, his voice low. "Are you saying you care about me?" Jessie's lips parted, but she hesitated before speaking. I think I've been afraid to admit it to myself. But yes, I care. And it's more than just being there for you when you needed help. I care about who you are. And I care about the future. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unresolved. Ryan felt a rush of emotions. Relief, confusion, hope, and fear, all flooding through him. He'd been so focused on his son, on his father's passing, on his own survival that he hadn't realized how deep his feelings for Jesse had become. He swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the moment. I can't just drop everything and go after what I want. My life isn't just mine anymore. It's Luke's too. I know, Jesse said, her eyes softening. I'm not asking you to choose between me and him, but I can't keep pretending that we're not on different paths. I'm offering you a chance to change your future, but only if you're ready to take it. Ryan's pulse quickened. It was like Jesse had read the thoughts swirling in his head, like she knew exactly what he was afraid of. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Luke, his life, his future. The question was, could he make a choice that would impact them both, even if it meant stepping into the unknown? I don't know if I can, Ryan admitted, his voice breaking with the vulnerability he rarely showed. I don't know if I can make that kind of decision. It feels too big. Jessie leaned back in her chair, her hands folding together in front of her. I know it's not easy, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that end up being the best. Ryan was silent, his thoughts racing. This was the moment he had been avoiding for weeks. This was the point where everything could change. But he was terrified, not of the future, but of losing everything he had, his son, his simplicity, his sense of control. The bell above the door chimed, and Ryan looked up to see a couple walking into the cafe. The normalcy of the moment hit him hard. Here he was, on the brink of a life-altering decision, and the world outside kept spinning, unaffected. Turning his attention back to Jesse, Ryan finally spoke. I can't make a decision like this right now. I need time. I need to think. Jessie nodded, understanding in her eyes. I get it. I'm not going anywhere. But don't wait too long, Ryan. You're running out of time. Ryan stood up, his heart heavy. I'll figure it out. I promise. As he walked out of the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something irreversible. But deep down, he knew one thing. He was no longer the same person he had been when he first met Jessie. She had changed him in ways both big and small. And now it was time for him to decide if he was ready to change even more. As Ryan drove home, his mind was spinning with questions. Could he risk everything for a chance at something more? What if he made the wrong choice? But just as the doubt settled in, his phone buzzed again. A message from Luke's school. His heart stopped. What now? Ryan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this unsettled. His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't just a notification. It was a message from Luke's school. He parked outside his apartment complex, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling his stomach twist into knots. Emergency contact needed. Please call us as soon as possible. His pulse shot up. He swiped open the message, his fingers trembling slightly, and dialed the number listed. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Hello, Mr. Parker? This is Ms. Davis from Luke's school. There's been an incident. Luke is fine, but he's shaken up, and we think it's best if you come in right away. Ryan's heart stopped. What happened? Is he okay? I'm sure he'll be fine. He's with the school counselor right now. But we need you to come in and speak with her. Ryan's mind raced, his thoughts scattering. He didn't have time to process what was happening. He just needed to get to Luke. Without another word, he hung up and sped toward the school. His mind clouded with worry. The uncertainty gnawed at him. What if something had happened to his son? What if this was just another complication he couldn't handle? He didn't know how he would explain any of this to Jessie. She had already given him so much of her time, her heart. But that was before he knew he was standing on the edge of a much deeper mess than he had realized. The school's parking lot was almost empty when Ryan arrived, the cold air biting at his skin as he rushed inside. He was directed to the counselor's office, where he found Luke sitting on the couch, eyes wide and distant. The moment Luke saw him, his face crumpled, and Ryan's heart broke in an instant. "Hey, buddy, what happened?" Ryan asked, kneeling in front of Luke, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. Luke sniffled and wiped his nose. I don't know, Dad. It was just, I got into trouble. I didn't mean to." Ryan glanced at the school counselor, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. She motioned for Ryan to join her at the desk. "Luke was involved in a confrontation with another student today," she explained quietly, her hands clasped together. "He didn't start it, but it escalated very quickly. He's upset, but he's also scared. We believe it's linked to something happening at home." Ryan's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" The counselor gave a small sigh, her gaze flickering to Luke, who was sitting with his head down. "We're concerned about the situation with his mother. We understand there's been a lot of upheaval lately, and Luke might be internalizing some of that stress. It's not uncommon for children in situations like this to act out in ways they can't fully understand." Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. He'd been so caught up in his own battles that he hadn't realized how deeply Luke was being affected. "I'm not sure I follow," Ryan said, his voice hoarse. "You think it's because of me?" "Not necessarily," the counselor said gently. "But children are often mirrors of their parents' emotions. They pick up on the unspoken tension, the things that are left unaddressed. Luke's been through a lot already." Ryan felt his throat close. The counselor was right. He had been trying so hard to hold everything together, to focus on his work, his responsibilities, but it had all been too much. His father's death, the pressure of his job, and everything with Jesse. It hadn't occurred to him just how much Luke had been holding inside. "I can't believe I missed this," Ryan whispered to himself, his mind spinning. "I should have been there for him more. I didn't even see it." The counselor gave him a reassuring smile, placing a hand on his arm. "It's not too late. The most important thing now is that you're here, and you're ready to help him through this." Ryan nodded slowly, trying to steady his breathing. Luke needed him more than ever, and he wasn't going to let him down. But even as he promised himself that, another thought echoed in his mind. What did this mean for everything else? What about Jesse? He had been so caught up in his own fears that he'd almost ignored what mattered most. Luke's happiness, his safety, those had to come first. "I'm going to take him home now," Ryan said, standing up and walking over to Luke. He pulled his son into a tight hug, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. He'd been so focused on his own struggles that he'd almost forgotten the one thing that mattered most: his son's well-being. As they walked to the car, Ryan's thoughts were all over the place. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't do this alone. He couldn't fix everything on his own. He needed help, and for the first time he realized how much he needed Jessie. She had been there for him in ways he never expected, and now it was time for him to stop running from his feelings and face what mattered. He needed to tell her everything. He needed to tell her the truth. The car ride home was silent and Ryan's mind raced. He knew what he had to do, but when he opened his phone to send a message to Jessie, he hesitated. He couldn't put this off anymore. His next step, his choice, would shape everything. What would Jessie say when he told her the truth? Ryan sat on the edge of the couch, his phone in his hand, staring at the screen. He had typed the message to Jessie 3 times already, and each time, he deleted it before hitting send. He knew he couldn't keep putting it off. Luke had been through enough. And Jessie? She deserved to know the truth. He was trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed right. How could he explain the mess he'd made? How could he tell her he was scared? Scared of his son's future, scared of failing again, and scared of the love he felt for Jessie. He thought about how everything had gotten so tangled. The pressure, the guilt, the overwhelming feeling that he had to do it all alone. But now, he realized that doing it alone was what had brought him to this breaking point. Ryan took a deep breath and put the phone down. It wasn't the words that mattered most right now, it was the action. "Dad!" Luke's voice broke through his thoughts. Ryan turned to see his son standing in the doorway, his face still drawn with the remnants of his earlier upset. But something in his expression had softened. Maybe it was the quiet after the storm, Maybe it was the reassurance of being home. Ryan stood up, meeting his son's gaze. "Yeah, buddy?" Ryan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm okay," Luke said, his voice small. "I know you're trying to fix everything, but you don't have to. I'm okay." Ryan's chest tightened, a lump forming in his throat. He knelt in front of Luke, taking his hands into his own. "I've been a mess, haven't I?" Ryan said quietly. Luke nodded, then looked down at his hands. "You've been busy. It's okay, I get it. I didn't know if you still cared, you know? With everything going on." Ryan's heart cracked at the words. He hadn't realized how deeply his son had felt the distance. The last thing he wanted was for Luke to feel like he was neglected or unimportant. "I care more than you know, Luke," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was just scared. I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't know how to fix it." Luke wiped at his eyes. "It's not all on you, Dad." Ryan squeezed his son's hands. "I know, and I'm sorry. You deserve better than that." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of their shared history hung between them, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a moment of understanding, of recognition that they had both been through a lot. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. A way forward. Ryan stood up and placed a hand on Luke's shoulder. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what happens." Luke nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I know, Dad. I know." Just then, Ryan's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jesse. He hesitated for a moment, then read it. It was simple, but it sent a shockwave through his body. "Can we talk? I think we need to figure things out." Ryan's heart skipped. This was it. He knew what he had to do. "Luke, I'm going to talk to Jesse, okay?" Ryan said, his voice filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "We need to figure out some things. But I promise, I'm here for you always." Luke gave a small nod. "Go talk to her, Dad. I'll be okay." Ryan's stomach churned as he grabbed his coat and keys. He stepped out the door, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was time to stop running, time to face the truth, no matter how scary it felt. The drive to Jesse's apartment felt endless. Ryan's mind was full of doubt, but also a flicker of hope. He was starting to realize that maybe he hadn't been alone all along. He had Luke, and now he could have Jesse too. But it wasn't going to be easy. Nothing ever was. And no matter how much he wanted to fix things, it would take time. As he pulled into the parking lot outside Jesse's building, he saw her car parked near the entrance. His heart raced as he walked toward the door. The weight of everything they'd been through was heavy, but it wasn't impossible to carry anymore. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward, together. He knocked softly on her door, his hand trembling just slightly. Moments passed before he heard her footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there she was, looking as beautiful as he remembered. But there was something different in her eyes. Something softer, less guarded. It was as if, just like him, she was ready to stop pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "Ryan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a little shakily, but it was real. "Hey, Jesse. He stopped, trying to find the right words. "I'm sorry. I didn't handle things the way I should have. I was scared, but that doesn't excuse the way I've treated you. I should have trusted you more. I should have let you in. You didn't deserve any of that." Jesse stood there, taking in his words, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, the world felt frozen. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. "I'm not perfect either," she said softly, looking down at the floor. "I pushed you away too, Ryan. I didn't want to deal with my own fears. And when everything got too real, I didn't know how to handle it." Ryan stepped closer, his heart pounding. "We've both been through a lot, but we don't have to keep carrying this on our own anymore. I'm here, Jesse. I'm not going anywhere." Jessie raised her eyes to meet his, her gaze full of emotion. She took a deep breath, then reached out and took his hand in hers. "Maybe we can start over," she said quietly. "Maybe we can find a way back to each other." Ryan's heart soared. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally where he needed to be. with her, with Luke. They were all in this together, and that was all that mattered now. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The weight that had once felt so crushing now seemed manageable. Maybe there would be hard times ahead, but they didn't have to face them alone. As they stood there, holding each other's hands, a new chapter was about to begin. A chapter full of healing, forgiveness, and the kind of love that could survive anything. But could they truly move forward? Or was the past still too heavy to let go of? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.